Welcome to Chapter 9, where we will be discussing the muscular system. When you're thinking about muscles, you should know first thing that there are three different types of muscles that are in the human body. You have skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. My apologies. Let me try to get this out of the way. All right. So skeletal muscle. The name tells you what it is, where it goes. So skeletal muscles are the muscles that are attached to the bones. These are the ones that allow you to move. Therefore, they are voluntary muscles, meaning they are consciously controlled. You can control them when you want to. Cardiac muscle. Cardiac means heart. This is the type of muscle that makes up the walls of the heart. Because it's the heart, it is involuntary. You do not control your heartbeat. Of course, you can influence your heartbeat. You can speed up or slow down the heartbeat um, voluntarily, but you do not think about your heart beating every single time it beats, 60 to 100 times per minute, every hour of every day of every part of your life. This is non-consciously controlled, involuntary muscle. Then you have smooth muscle. These are the muscles that are found in the walls of your internal organs, like your digestive system, like the walls of your blood vessels, etc. These are also involuntary. You do not control the functioning of the muscles in your internal organs. Exploring skeletal muscle a little bit more, you have over 600 skeletal muscles in the body, well over 600. So from the very small muscles that we've seen, like the erector pili muscles, to the very large muscles, like the muscles of your back, the muscles of your leg, etc. These are attached primarily to bones, but you also have muscles that are attached to the skin, especially when you're talking about your face and being able to make your facial expressions. Um, Again, skeletal muscles are under conscious control, meaning you can voluntarily move them when you want to. Um, The skeletal muscles are considered the organs of the muscular system. So they are organs when you're looking at the muscular system. Skeletal muscle is composed of the following tissues, not only the skeletal muscle tissue, so the cells that make up skeletal muscle, but you also have your nervous tissue, blood, and connective tissue associated with it to make skeletal muscles work the way they do. So previously we said that connective tissue was associated with your skeletal muscle. Connective tissues cover the skeletal muscles. You have different types of covering made up of skeletal tissue that cover muscles. You have fascia, tendons, and aponeuroses. So fascia is a thin covering of connective tissue around a muscle. So when you look at a muscle, whether it's the thigh muscle, the arm muscle, the biceps, the triceps, those specific muscles, you have a thin piece of connective tissue that covers that muscle, and that is called fascia. Then you have a cord-like mass of connective tissue that is at the end of each muscle, so at each end of the muscle, that connects that muscle to bone. So fascia was a thin membranous type of cover that covers each muscle. Tendon is a cord-like mass of connective tissue that connects the muscle to the bone itself, like your Achilles tendon. Then you have aponeuroses. Aponeuroses are a sheet-like mass as opposed to a cord-like mass. It's a sheet-like mass of connective tissue that connects muscle to bone, muscle to skin, or muscles to other muscles. So when you look at muscle tissue, think of chicken muscle, and you are pulling muscles apart. You see this white connective tissue or white tissue that connects the muscles together. Those are aponeuroses. So they again will connect not only muscles to bone, but also muscles to skin. So when we talked about facial expression and having muscle attached to the skin to control your facial expression, we're saying that the connective tissue that connects that muscle to the skin is aponeuroses, a sheet-like mass of connective tissue that connects the two, and then it also connects your muscles. So that is how skeletal muscle um, is connected to itself and other structures. But the way that skeletal muscle is packaged is through three other types of connective tissue that surround muscle. You have epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium. Epimysium is the connective tissue that surrounds the entirety of the muscle. So you have the fascia that covers the muscle. That's that thin covering of connective tissue that covers the muscle. Then you have the epimysium that surrounds that is deep to the fascia, surrounds the entire muscle. You have the perimysium that surrounds fascicles within a muscle. We'll talk about what fascicles are shortly. And then the endomysium is deep to that or inside of that, and this surrounds your muscle fibers. Remember, I said in previous video that when we are talking about muscles and we're talking about the individual muscle cells, we will start to call those muscle fibers. So each of those muscle cells, each of those muscle fibers are surrounded by endomysium inside of a fascicle. So here we have an image of a muscle man. And so all of the skin has been removed so that you can see the muscles. Um, you can see the aponeuroses. So when you look at the epicranius muscle, so or also called the frontal orbicularis muscle, um, you will see that that muscle has a large muscle belly anteriorly and posteriorly at the frontal bone and at the occipital bone, and then connecting those two is a sheet-like mass of connective tissue called the aponeuroses. Um, Tendons are at the ends of each or at each end of a muscle that connects that muscle to a bone. And then you have that's all that's shown here. So aponeuroses and tendons. All right. So this is how a skeletal muscle is organized. Have a bone. The muscle is connected to a bone through a tendon. Remember, tendon is the cord-like connective tissue that connects a muscle to a bone. It is located on each end, the proximal and distal ends of your muscles. The muscle is then surrounded by a uh, epimysium. That epimysium surrounds the muscle fascia. I'm sorry, the fascia uh, is superficial, and the fascia surrounds the epimysium. Then you have perimysiums here and endomysiums that are deeper within that as the structures get smaller and smaller. So compartments and fascia. A compartment is a space that contains a group of muscles It also contains blood vessels and nerves, and each compartment is enclosed by fascia. Compartment syndrome. So if a person gets damage to one of these compartments, to the muscles, one of the muscles in this um, group of muscles that are enclosed by fascia, remember that anytime a tissue gets damaged, the body responds by creating an inflammation process. That body responds by creating inflammation. The inflammation process includes fluid increasing, the amount of fluid in an area increasing, and it brings about with it properties that will help to heal that area. As that fluid starts to accumulate in that compartment, it increases that pressure inside of that compartment. And if too much pressure inside of an enclosed space starts to build up, then it can lead to a decrease of oxygen and nutrients because you have a decrease of blood vessels. And because of that, it can lead to severe pain. So think about it this way. Let's say we had a bunch of, we're going to create a compartment. So we have some, let's throw some muscles in there because I can't think of anything else to put in there. We'll put some straws in there, some nice thin straws filled with nutrients that the muscle needs. We'll also put an electric cord in there. Um, and all of it is insulated because we have fluid floating around through there to help keep everything moist, keep the muscles that's in there fit. So because there's damage, we're going to increase the amount of fluid in that space. And remember, we have nerve or electrical cord in there. We have a straw or something that's going to bring that vessel. And this is a thin straw. So the more fluid we put in that enclosed space, the more it's going to create more pressure. Increase in pressure will start to close those blood vessels and will start to pinch off those nerves. And because of that, you're going to have the decrease in oxygen levels because that blood is going to stop flowing. You have a decrease in nutrients because nutrients will flow with the blood. And the decrease of oxygen and nutrients will cause pain in those muscles that are being affected by the accumulation or the quick accumulation of that fluid. The fascia of each muscle is a part of a fascia network. Portions of the fascia surrounding the muscle is considered deep fascia. This connects to your subcutaneous fascia underneath your skin. This network also connects to the subserous fascia that is a part of the serous membrane. So we talked about serous membranes as those membranes that surround organs, and it is uh, a double layer membrane that has serous fluid in the middle of it that decreases inflammation because it decreases friction. So that fascia that is surrounding this compartment is continuous with the rest of the fascia in the body, the muscle fascia. It's also continuous with the fascia around those deep muscles, the fascia underneath the skin, and the fascia that surrounds the organs. So skeletal muscle fibers or skeletal muscle cells. When talking about skeletal muscle cells, it is important to understand how skeletal muscle cells differentiate from other different types of cells, especially other muscle cells. So, for one, we know that it's multinucleated, means that it has many nuclei in each muscle cell or each muscle fiber. Now, let's talk about the organelles or the different parts of each muscle fiber. You have the sarcolemma, When you look up the word sarco or the prefix sarco, you know that it pertains to the muscle. So sarcolemma is the cell membrane, the name of the cell membrane of a muscle fiber. So it's the same thing as regular cell membrane. It is just that it's the cell membrane that belongs specifically to a muscle fiber. The sarcoplasm is the name of the cytoplasm of a muscle cell. So plasma, liquid portion inside of each cell, specifically muscle cell or muscle fiber. Then you have myofibrils. Myo also means muscle. Fibrils are like fibers. So myofibrils, these are long parallel structure that run down the length of the fiber or the longest portion of the fiber. It consists of filaments. There are two different types of filaments that make up each myofibril, and it will be important for you to understand these muscle filaments or myofilaments because we'll use these in depth to talk about how each muscle cell works. So, in each myofibril, um, consists of thin filaments and thick filaments. So little fibers that some are thick, some are thin. The thin ones are called actin filaments. The thick ones are called myosin filaments. So thin is actin, thick is myosin. Each myofibril is arranged in a sarcomere. A sarcomere is the unit that connects end to end that makes up your myofibril. So, sarcomere is the smallest unit of contraction in each muscle fiber. Sarcomere is the smallest unit of contraction in each muscle fiber. All right? So, sarcomere um, makes up myofibrils. Myofibrils are long parallel structures that run down each fiber, consists of thin actin filaments and thick myosin filaments. You also have the sarcoplasmic reticulum inside of each cell. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is the endoplasmic reticulum of muscle cells. In the muscle cells, this is what stores your calcium. Remember, I've said many times that calcium is not only important to make your bones stronger, but it's also used by other cells in the body, namely your muscle cells. Your muscle cells need calcium in order to contract. So sarcoplasmic reticulum is the structure inside of each muscle fiber that stores calcium. Then you have your transverse tubules or your T-tubules. T-tubules relay electrical impulses to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Then you have your triad. Your triad consists of one T-tubule and two sarcoplasmic reticulum cisternae. A cistern is a structure that holds stuff. Make sure you're looking up the term cistern, CISTERN, so you can understand what a cistern is. So this you have in each triad one T-tubule. Remember, the T-tubule is what relays those electrical impulses to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and the sarcoplasmic reticulum cisternae, there are two of them associated with the triad. So, sarcoplasm, inside of the sarcoplasm of your muscle fiber, you have your, all right, so say your triad. Triad consists of the cisternae of the sarcoplasmic reticulum as well as a T-tubule. So this is your triad. Your myofibril is this structure. Your sarcoplasm is the liquid cytoplasm of the cell. So that is the liquid that surrounds, or the fluid that surrounds each part or each organelle in that muscle fiber. The sarcolemma is the name of the cell membrane of a muscle fiber. You have several nuclei associated with each muscle fiber because it's a multinucleated cell. Inside of your sarcomere, this is a sarcomere. Inside of each, you have your thin actin filaments and your thick myosin filaments. Then you have your other organelles associated as well, like your mitochondria. Skeletal muscle fiber structure. All right. So when we look at your the structure of the skeletal muscle, we're looking at the structure of your sarcomeres. Remember, I said that the sarcomere is the smallest contractile unit of a muscle fiber. Smallest contractile unit of a muscle fiber. So looking here, um, you have your sarcomere. So let's look at this area from here to here is the structure that we're about to explain now. So from the zigzag line to zigzag line, we're about to explain this structure. So I'll tell you the parts of it first, and then we'll look at it, look at the image of it. Remember when in previous chapters, especially in tissues, we talked about how some muscle fibers are striated and some are not striated. Skeletal muscle was one of them that had a striation pattern. The striations in skeletal muscles are created by these myofilaments. So the alternating of these thick and thin muscle fibers. So let me go back. So in this image, remember I said this is your sarcomere. This is the unit we're about to explain. You notice that you have these thick lines that are all lined up here, and then thinner lines that are lined up there. When you look at a muscle fiber under the microscope and you see striations or stripes, excuse me, it is this little band of thick fibers and thin fibers that create your stripes. All right, so that is what's causing the striations of your skeletal muscles. Let's go back and look at what those are. So a sarcomere consists of these different structures. You have your eye band. Eye band is your light band. This is the light portion of the striations. This light band is composed of your thin actin filaments. The thin filaments make up the light band, or the band that's light in color. This is called eye, the eye band. So there's an eye in light. So the light bands are your eye bands. Then you have your A bands. The A bands are the dark bands. So the dark bands, there's an A in dark. So the A bands are your dark bands, and this is composed of your myosin thick filaments. So the thick filaments, they're thicker, they're going to be darker. They make up the A band. So this is composed of thick myosin filaments with portions that overlap with the thin actin filaments. So the A band is composed of your thick actin filament, your thick myosin filaments that can overlap with parts of the thin actin filaments. Your H zone is the center of the A band. H zone is the center of the A band, and this is composed of only your thick myosin filaments. Remember, the A band is composed of both where you have your thick myosin filaments and your thin actin filaments that overlap it. There will be a portion where you don't have any of that overlap with the actin thin filaments. That place where there's no overlap and you only have your A band, so only have your thick myosin filaments, it's called the H zone. Then you have your Z line, also called the Z disc. This is the boundary of the sarcomere. This is where you have the center of the I band, where there's an anchor, where the I band filaments are anchored in place by the Z band. Z band is that zigzag line. So the zigzag line that I pointed to before is the Z band, and that is where your sarcomeres, that's the end of your sarcomeres, or the boundary of each sarcomere. That boundary happens to be in the center of an I band that is anchoring those filaments in place. Then you have your M line. The M line is the center of the sarcomere itself. It's also the center of the A band, and that's what anchors the thick filaments. So let's look at an image. So this is your sarcomere from Z line to Z line. The Z line is in the middle of your I band. So you have your thin filaments, a band of thin filaments here, and it's only thin filaments, which is why it is lighter. All right, and at the middle of that light band is your Z filaments. So sarcomere goes from Z line, not Z filament, Z line. Sarcomere goes from Z line to Z line. So that is a sarcomere unit. You have your A band where you have your thick filaments, and the A bands will overlap with your I bands or your thin filaments. So the A band is the length of your thick filaments, also includes that overlap with the light band, the light actin filaments. But in the center of that A band, you'll have your H zone where you only have thick filament. So your center of your H zone is where the center of your sarcomere is where you have the H zone that only has thick filament inside of it. So H zone, only thick filament. That only thick filaments. And in the center of that H zone is your M line. The M line is what attaches the thick filaments to the sarcomere structure. So M line is inside of your A band. Your Z line is inside of your I band. The H zone is only thick filaments. The A band is thick filament including the part that overlaps with the I band or the light bands. You have your I band that is only thin filaments, and then the center of that is your Z line that connects and anchors those thin filaments in place. We will stop this video here, and we will continue in the next video with the next concept.